All right, welcome everybody. Global Leaders Local Coffee here. And one thing I wanted to do is welcome Jody Rose, who's joining me today. She is not only involved in the New England Venture Capital Association, but also focused on a great initiative called Hack.Diversity. Jody, welcome.
Hi, Mike. It's good to see you. It's interesting because you and I serve on the Mass Challenge Board of Advisors, and this is actually the first time that we're having, more of a conversation. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you. Thanks for joining us. I guess first, I've forgotten this in prior ones, so I'm going to start with it. Coffee drinker? Are you a beverage drinker in the morning?
So I'm not a coffee drinker. I drink tea every now and then, but I've developed this habit during COVID of drinking at least 2 cups of water in the morning before I eat breakfast. And I don't know where I read it, but I read it somewhere, probably a blog, that it was important to bathe your organs with water. So every morning, give my organs a bath with 2 cups of water.
I like that. I've heard a lot about how much mood is controlled by water intake as well. So oftentimes when you're feeling, when you're feeling down or grumpy or tired, part of that is dehydration, which has been something driving me to drink more and more water. Unfortunately for me, I'm a coffee drinker, and COVID has been bad for that. But I'm drinking Springline, which is a Rhode Island-based coffee that got shipped to me as part of the show. Someone thought I would enjoy it, and it's great. So that's what I'm drinking this morning.
Caffeinated or decaf?
Very caffeinated. What I've done is I've stopped. In some ways, my morning intake has increased in COVID, but my afternoon intake has dropped. Being out of the office, where I used to go meet someone for coffee or latte or something in the afternoon, I'm not drinking as much in the afternoon. So I'm pretty much done by 11 or 12 o'clock.
Good. And coffee is actually, people have now learned that coffee is actually good for you in moderation.
I think everything in moderation is the right term. So maybe you could tell the audience a little bit about, New England Venture Capital Association and Hack.Diversity. That would be a great way to just give them some background.
Yeah. So the NEVCA, as we call it, don't call it NEVCA for short, because it sounds like an old aunt. But the NEVCA is an association, a trade association by definition, which is a term that I hate because I envision us and see us as really a 44-year-old startup. Our mission is to really foster an inclusive, collaborative, and prosperous venture and startup ecosystem. And we represent a little over 90 venture capital firms, and we act on their behalf to really look at macro level opportunities and challenges within the New England region, and work to help either do away with them or fix them or challenge them, so that we can create and foster an environment where entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship thrives. And then when we, so there are 4 pillars that really sort of guide our work. One is really, we're a node for connection. So we're obsessed with making sure that founders and investors have ways to connect. And we do that through many, many events like Unpitch and the Nevy Awards, et cetera. We also play a role in Beacon Hill. So, we have a voice, and whenever there is policy that will inhibit or promote innovation, we want to make sure that we are at the forefront of that, because it's really important. We also see ourselves as a megaphone for the industry. And lastly, another part of our work that has taken up a lot of our time and has gotten probably the most notoriety most recently is really creating a more diverse and inclusive workforce. And so we focus on that in 2 ways. One is, we've continued to try to drive initiatives and events and ways in which we can increase the number of female investors, and also females and people of color that are getting investments. But on the other side, we launched an initiative called Hack.Diversity. We launched or founded it in 2016. And basically, Hack.Diversity is a workforce development or talent provider that connects remarkable Latinx and Black software engineers, IT professionals, data analysts to companies, while also helping companies to really foster and create the culture that they endeavor to have. And so we've been working on that for the last 4 or so years, and it has done really well.
No, that's great. That's great background, and so important, I would say, in this day and age, where not only just looking at some of the social injustice that's been right out there, and and so visible lately, but also, at Flywire, we've been trying to focus people on how do we take action, right? It's one thing to support certain causes, and it's another thing to show action and drive it all the way through execution. And so, I think organizations like that are so important, because a lot of companies are just not, they're not sure how to have impact necessarily in some of these areas, and they need some support and some help as they're figuring it out.
Yeah, and I would say through the NEVCA and also through Hack Diversity, we kind of really believe in aggressive transparency and transformation, right? So with Hack, we're not just about disrupting how you think about hiring talent, but we're also really focused on disrupting how you think about your culture. And we do that in this really collaborative way where the companies that participate in Hack, not only are they participating as, talent to tap into the talent, but they're also going through DEI immersive experiences with other companies, learning from us, but also learning best practices from the companies that they're sitting side by side with.
That's great. So important, right? Because I think what we're seeing at Flywire is people are engaged for those topics. They want to see their companies having those dialogue. And oftentimes, again, if the company hasn't focused on that prior to, this year, maybe they don't have the tools in place. They don't have kind of the cultural aspects in place to truly support that. So that's great that there's also that kind of support system in there too, to learn from other companies.
There is. And if I can give you any unsolicited advice, not that you're asking for it, but I would, and this is what we say to all companies, like no one has the magic bullet for how to, flip the switch and make companies more diverse and more equitable. But you sort of have to lean into what's really hard and recognize your gaps and your weaknesses and challenge your organization, challenge yourself, challenge your executives to think disruptively, right? Like, get in and do the messy work and try to figure it out. You're going to have fits and starts. You'll test some things that don't work. But, for us, what we say to our partners is don't give up. This is not going to be an overnight solution. This is the long game. And so you have to commit to the long game.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Well, I always love to cover some topics that maybe aren't covered in traditional kind of interview settings. But I always, at Flywire, we always focus a lot on understanding who we are, understanding what passions we have, how to be fulfilled. And I'm a big believer that a lot of that goes back to experiences in life, early professional careers, education, childhood, even. Curious if looking at what you've done, all the roles you've had in your executive career, what you're doing right now, if it correlates in any way to childhood or things that made you who you are. So always love to give the audience a little insight into that.
Yeah. So I would say when I look back at my childhood and where I am now, when I was growing up, I wanted to be an astronaut, a doctor, a singer, an entertainer. I'm none of those. But what I will say is, when I think about what was instilled in me and how I was raised, I'm a parent. I'm a child of immigrants. So both of my parents came to the country from Jamaica, and they really instilled a strong work ethic. But also there was this feeling that still permeates with my parents now and into my home and the work that I do, that, whatever you do, personally or professionally, is not just about you, right? So how are you helping somebody else? My dad was a blue collar worker for a long time. He parked cars when he came to the US before he became an entrepreneur. And there was never a gas station that we could pull into or a restaurant that we could go to where we weren't over tipping somebody. Whenever we go to Jamaica, if someone was asking for help, my dad would pull over on the side of the street and make sure he's giving, right? And so that has instilled in me the need to really make sure that everything that I do goes way beyond just how it benefits me. It's like, how am I helping somebody else? So that's had a huge impact on me.
Yeah, I love that. Love that so much. I remember my father, almost ended up in a successful business career, but almost became a c mechanic. He only had one teacher in high school that told him he was any good at school. And if he didn't have one teacher, happened to be an accounting professor, that actually told him, hey, maybe he should consider college. He would have had a completely different career, would have changed, so much about our lives. Right. And so, wouldn't be a day where he wouldn't kind of remind us of the importance of that, and the fact that, hey, it just takes one person to point out some good thing about you, and could ultimately change your whole trajectory of life.
So similar to your dad, Mike, and I've told this story before. But I remember having a high school guidance counselor who basically sat my mother and I down at the beginning of the college application process and basically said, you don't have what it takes to get into college. So, at best you should apply to a community college, and, figure it out. And my mom, I walked out of that meeting defeated, and my mom walked out of that meeting pissed. And, it was because of her, my parents, and people around me that said, no, you're going to do what you want to do. And so I actually, got into a pretty prestigious university. And so, yeah, it
That's great.
definitely takes people around you that believe in you to help you forward.
For sure. That's a great story. So, obviously we're all living in this kind of COVID world. Is there something that you found, I guess, joy in this kind of unusual time when we were on lockdown and we're in this kind of weird new normal that's starting out? Is there something you also maybe you long for, you missed in the old world that you wish you could go back to?
Um, that's a good question. So two parts. So the things that I'm really enjoying now is just the intentional connection to family, right? I can't tell you how many times in a week I'm FaceTiming with my parents, my siblings, friends that I haven't talked to in a long time. And also just being more intentional about the time with my husband and my children, which has been really nice. And something that, because of pre-COVID busy lives, didn't really have as much of that time spent. The things that I miss my team a ton. We see each other over Zoom, but that's so different than seeing each other in person. I miss walking in Boston. I miss, having meetings with VCs and entrepreneurs in person. So I definitely miss that in-person connection. And but I don't take for granted what I'm getting during this sort of isolation period and spending more time with my family, because they definitely missed me a lot when I was working like crazy.
Yeah, no, I love the family time. I'd also say some of the relationships that I've had before have been almost easier to maintain in COVID. I also feel like some of the newer relationships where I wish I could spend more time with some either new people that have joined the company or, just networking in general, right? That's kind of disappeared a bit. So we also have a question that did come in. So we're going to try a question that came in through LinkedIn.
Yeah.
How is the New England Venture Capital Association supporting investment in women's health companies?
Yeah, so I would say we don't focus necessarily specifically just on health companies. What we do, is make sure that through every touch point that we have, through every event that we have, through every initiative that we have, we're focusing on trying to get more women in the pipeline, and being, really aggressive in, reaching out to our members, introducing them to potential founders. If there's, what I would say is, if there's someone that is looking to make a connection to an investor, and they're having a challenge, please reach out to me. You could feel free to email me at jody@newenglandvc.org, and I'd be happy to, chat with you, put you in touch. What I do recognize is, as women, it is really hard to, not only build a company, but raise funding. And so what we try to do is, decrease as many of those barriers as we can.
That's great. And so last question for me, and then feel free if you got one, I heard rumors you may have a question for me or two. But to wrap up, you got a lot of people looking to build companies that kind of watch these episodes. You talked a little bit about leading teams earlier and some of the lessons you had, from your parents. Can you talk a little bit about maybe, what do you think there's a key to building a successful company, leading teams? Have you seen either a skill set or a behavior that you would, encourage people to make sure that they're investing in as they're hoping to run their own company someday?
Yeah, so I'll say that I that I don't consider myself the be all end all in answering this question, but what I will say is, where I've seen success is where you have, leaders that are humble and, and exhibit a certain amount of humility in how they build their teams. And when they're building their teams, they're looking for people that can really sort of, be additive, be a culture add, not a culture fit. They're looking for people that can really, fill the gaps, that they have as a leader. And when I think back at my team, the one thing that I love about my team is they are, really divorced from this "what's in it for me" mentality, right? And so, as you're building a company, as you're building your team, really try to sort of separate yourself from "what's in it for me," and really start to think about, okay, as I'm building this company, as I'm building this team, how can I be of service? What can I be doing? What is the impact that I can be making? Because I will guarantee you that you will be much more fulfilled if you take that mindset.
That's great. One thing I often say is the organizational pyramid in business is backwards, right? The leader, instead of having the pyramid with the tip on the top being the CEO, it's actually upside down, right? The people that are touching the customer, the people that can figure out product market fit, those are the folks that are kind of at the top of that, and everyone else is supporting, right? All the way to the president, the CEO, right? Like that's the focus. And for so long we've been told it's the other way around. It's about hierarchy. It's about who's on top of the pyramid. But I've always believed the pyramid's upside down.
I completely agree. I say the people that I work with, while, from a hierarchical standpoint, I lead the organization, I learn more from them than they ever learned from me. I rely more on them and their expertise and their judgment than they probably rely on me. And I don't think that our organization would be where we are. I don't think that I would be where I am personally if it weren't for the team that I get to work alongside every day.
Sounds great. Well, any question for me before we go and wrap up?
Yeah. So when you think pre-COVID to now, what has been the most disruptive change that you've had to deal with at Flywire?
I think probably one of the most disruptive parts for us was less so our Flymates working from home, right? So we have 12 offices globally, about 500 people. The transition for us work from home or work from anywhere was not that hard. We were kind of digital flexible anyway. The challenge for us was maybe two I'd call out. One was the transition for our customer and how do we adapt our mindset, right? Educational institutions, medical hospitals, they weren't accustomed to working from home, right? A lot of the administrator folks, finance departments didn't have that flexibility. So their shift was actually harder. So how did we, focus on them? How did we adapt our product to make it easier for them in a digital world? So that was probably the first one that was challenging, more external. And then internal, it was just the lack of, the culture we had built over 10 years. It was very common inside a Flywire office, these great offices all around the world, to see people getting together, spending time after hours, people visiting from different countries and regions. We have 32 different nationalities in the company. It was almost common every week someone was in from a different place. And that just disappeared overnight. And so for us, it took us a little time to figure out how are we going to engage? How are we going to find little glimmers of getting together? Even just recently, we just announced this week, actually, we have a place up, it's about 2 hours north of Boston. It is a kind of giant, think of it as a giant VRBO type rental. And we're going to have, 10 Flymates working from there, all COVID tested negative. And they're going to try working from a centralized place. And, that's something that we're trying to, get a little bit of that back in this crazy world, open up our offices with social distancing and things. So we're trying to get a little bit of that back, even though we know things aren't going to go back to the way things were for quite some time, or if ever.
And so my last question for you is 5 years from now, where do you hope to see Flywire? And then where do you hope personally to see Mike?
Wow, that's a big one. I've always believed, Flywire has so much potential. We're still in the early innings of growth. We just look at these industries that are so massive, and so many of the functionality that we experience as consumers isn't available to our clients when it comes to making transactions easy. And so there's just so much room to grow to, just keep building the business, going into new verticals, new geographies. So I see the brand still around, right? We're not in this to go kind of exit the company and sell it. We're in this to build a sustainable long-term company. So, I hope to see it, well north of 1,000 employees, global business, maybe one that's a little more remote. And for me, what I've loved about this experience, right? I was a non-founder CEO, kind of reluctant CEO even at the beginning, but have seen this company go from, less than $1 million of revenue, north of 100 million of revenue and growing. And that experience has led me to just realize how much I love that part of the journey and how much support I had through the process. So, I'd hope in 5 years I'm, hopefully still running Flywire, but at the same time, hopefully finding ways to give back to the community a little more, and maybe helping other entrepreneurs who are looking to kind of experience that and build great things. So that's my hope. My kids will still be around, although some in college. So, hopefully I have a little more free time to go visit them and spend time with them as well.
Awesome. Well, what I would say to you is that the ecosystem here is really fortunate to have Flywire and you at the helm. So thanks for what you're doing in terms of job creation and, disruption. And we look forward to seeing you in 5 years.
Well, thanks for joining. Thanks for turning the tables again. And I know we had some more questions on LinkedIn. We'll respond to them. We didn't get to them all here in the live session, but we'll be sure to respond. And appreciate Jody, you being here with us today.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
All right. See you later.